and some music. Yay! Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, Adam Levy.
Hi, Cathy.
Yay! Well, I was telling Adam before we came on that I've been a fan of his, I guess for sounds like 20 years or something like that, right?
Wow, yeah.
Is that when Buttermilk Channel came out?
Yeah, I think that's right. That record is 20 years old.
Adam Levy, man. Yeah, yeah, as a lot of people here know, I'm a guitar fan, and I love singing with guitar. It's something about the vibration of where my sound comes and then the where it meets guitar, you know. There's a different kind of a space than with piano.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it's just beautiful thing. So yeah, I've been a fan of Adam since then.
Wow.
Yay! And yeah, and most recently, I was a few years ago, I was in New York at the Jazz Congress, and I went to see Liz Wright, and who should be playing? Adam. That was quite the band, actually.
Yeah. So you were here during like Winter Jazz Fest, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So then I think the band that you saw, this was at the Jazz Standard, right? At
I
the
think so.
yeah. So that was kind of a super band. Most of the time when I tour with Liz, it would be, her with bass and drums and a pianist, organist, and one guitar, me, or sometimes it's Chris Bruce, who has also toured with her a lot over the years. And for that particular show, she thought it would be fun to have me and Chris, so two guitars, and also to have the two keyboard players that she uses regularly, David Cook, who's here in New York, and Kenny Banks Sr., who's in Atlanta. And before that, I had played I played a couple of two guitar shows with Liz. The first shows I ever played with her, like 4 or 5 years ago, was just me and Chris. We did a couple of shows. There's a little jazz room in Vegas. I can't remember the name of it, but we did shows with Liz with two guitars. But uh, anyway, it was a really wild thing to have that many people on stage and that much music
It was
and
great. What a great evening. Yeah.
totally simpatico and everybody listening and um, Liz has the kind of voice that, if there's 8 people on stage, no problem. She's good. She's gonna rise above that. You know, it's yeah. That was really an amazing. I remember. Yeah, we played 2 nights there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
What's so cool about well, you said she rises above, and it's not that she gets loud, it's she joins in, you know. And and so she really has a voice in the tapestry of the music. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's when you know the musicians love and respect the singer, when you hear that, because you know, it it's like a huge acknowledgement for everybody, right? Kind of unspoken, but there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean rise above like it's a volume contest. I mean,
Yeah.
she can do that. I've been in rehearsals with her where for whatever reason she'll turn away from the microphone, and even in the room with the band, she can sing, as loud as the band. But I didn't mean it so much that way, but like just her presence and
Yeah.
yeah, and like you say, the way that uh, the regard in which everybody on stage holds Liz. Um, yeah, we're all in it together. It's a beautiful thing. And then if she picks up the tambourine, which she'll do a couple times in a night, then that connectivity is even deeper because then she's in it with her voice and also with another instrument, and we just feel all of that pulse and all of that energy. It's yeah, she's really special.
I saw her with the Count Basie Orchestra a few months ago.
Oh
And
wow.
I had no idea that she could sing standards, because I've only heard her sing her own thing.
Mm.
And I was very impressed. She had all the subtleties going on of a jazz singer, you know. Um, and it sounded really good, really good.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious how you started working with her.
You know, yeah, it's a funny story. Uh, Maybe 5 years ago, she was getting ready to make a record called Grace, which is her most recent studio record. And the guitar player, really there were two guitar players already scheduled to be on the record. One is Chris Bruce, who I mentioned a minute ago, and the other was Marvin Sewell, who is, both of those guys are amazing guitar players.
Yeah.
And the producer was Joe Henry, who's a friend of mine. And a little bit before they were recording, Liz came out to LA to just meet with Joe and kind of run through the tunes, make sure that the arrangements were making sense, make sure the keys made sense and all that stuff. And so Joe Henry, the producer, had planned this rehearsal with Liz at his house in Pasadena, with David Pilch on bass, and originally Chris Bruce was going to be there and run through it, but he, I don't remember exactly what was happening, but there was some kind of family health emergency situation. He needed to be with his family, Chris.
Yeah.
So Joe asked me if I could come over and just run through the tunes at his place with David Pilch, with Liz. And so that was the first time I'd met her, and I was so excited. I did as much as I could to prepare so I could show up and really get into the music with her. And I loved that afternoon at Joe's place. Just, it was very intimate because we're all just, gathered real close and not amplified and just listening to each other. And so that was the first time I played with her. And I felt a good connection, but of course, like I say, I mean, she was getting ready to make a record with two great guitar players, and she's had other guitar players in her band over the years. And so I wasn't really gunning for a gig. I really was just covering for Chris, who couldn't be there. And then the record came out, and she did some touring, and then at some point, she decided she wanted to do these kind of stripped down acoustic like shows. Like I mentioned, she had a couple of nights at this jazz club in Las Vegas that I can't remember the name of.
I can almost remember the name of, I think, but I can't. It's a
Yeah,
short name, right? It's like one
I think
word, I
so.
think.
So we played two shows there, and I think there was also maybe a show in Phoenix at the Musical Instrument Museum. I think we also did a set there. But anyway, that happened because when she decided she wanted to do a two guitar thing for that short run, Chris Bruce recommended me. He's been like her musical director, along with Kenny Banks, the organist, for a lot of years. And so he recommended me, and we got together, and it felt really good. So that was how it happened, through Chris's recommendation.
I see. Yeah. Well, yeah. Yep.
It's funny though. I'll say many years before, like in 2007, actually, a friend of mine was playing with her, a great drummer named Brandon Temple. And around that time, I think she was looking for a guitar player, and Brandon asked me if he could recommend me to Liz at that time. This is 2007. And I said, no, not, I mean, I would have loved to, but I had just gotten off the road with Norah Jones. I had just gotten off of like 7 or 8 years with her, and I was really wanting to be off the road. It was a very intentional thing. So I wasn't looking to start anything new. But it amazed me that all these years later, the opportunity came back around, because I thought, more than once, I thought, well, maybe I should have tried to make that connection then, because I love Liz's voice. I love the records that she makes. And it was just amazing that it came back around. And in fact, I got to play a gig with Liz, with Brandon Temple. Uh, this last year, we did a show in Chicago with, again, kind of an unusual lineup band for her. It was myself and Marvin Sewell on guitar, and Brandon, and that was a really fun show. No real rehearsal or preparation. We just had to kind of, show up and listen and pay attention, and um, all, it's an interesting thing if you play a lot of jazz, which I think of myself as a jazz musician, even though I also play a lot of other stuff that maybe you wouldn't consider jazz. Um, then I think jazz becomes a mindset as much as anything else. And so I tend to not get really locked into guitar parts. Um, it's just more about, learning the song and not the guitar part. Sometimes the guitar part is important and you have to play it because it's a signature part of a song, and it doesn't hold together without it. But um, when I approach, in on playing with Liz, I think even though we're not playing standards, really, it's very rare that we'll play a standard in her set. The approach is still jazz in that it's improvisational and it's different every night, and um, it's about listening to each other and kind of mutual respect, mutual admiration, and making stuff happen even if it's never happened before.
Totally get it. Yeah. And that's probably why she's so good. She was so good with the Count Basie Orchestra, you know?
Yeah, I wish I could have heard that.
Really, it was just so good. Kind of reminds me of the same kind of what's the word? The same, I don't know if genre is the proper word, but as Lisa Fisher,
Hmm.
her band. Have you seen her band?
No.
I'd love to. I don't have the record in here of his name. Dan, if you're listening, tell me the guitar player's name. So Lisa has a guitar trio, which she's had for a long time because I've seen her with the exact same trio several
Hmm.
times.
Hmm.
The guitarist is kind of the musical director. He plays some piano too, but he's really a really good guitarist. And the drummer, incredible. I think he might be Italian. And
Hmm.
and then Lisa is similar in that, I mean, this it's the same songs and basic arrangements, but it's not everything, it's within that there's freedom, and uh her voice is incredible. Her range is crazy, and
Hmm.
she's got a very funny humor, and she sings rock songs, and they do a lot of like very good remakes, and um it's almost like seeing a jazz concert, which is kind of how I felt that at the Jazz Standard, seeing you guys with Liz Wright. And she's not singing jazz, but it's like you say, it's kind of a perspective, and it's a space that gets created. And I love that. I love that because, good, the whole thing, good music is good music, right?
Right. Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, it's that was really enjoyable. I remember I just thought everybody was great. I was very blown away by the organ player, but everybody was great. I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you who's saying hi, okay?
Okay.
Taylor Hatch.
Oh, wow.
Anyway,
Hi, Taylor
Taylor,
Hatch.
he has a lot of great questions always. My friend Roland Asca runs Who. is a guitar player, although he hasn't been a professional guitar player for a long time, but he has 13 guitars in his closet. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
He's still a guitar player.
Yeah.
And Adam Levine.
Wow, Adam. Oh man. Wow, he was
Yeah.
my teacher at Dick Grove.
Oh, I keep wanting him to do a show, and he said he will do that. Let's see. Oh, Taylor likes your guitar. Um, and Janelle Sadler. Hey, Janelle. Oh, so we have some questions too. Veronica Ebert. Hi, Veronica. She's good
Veronica.
day. So you know where she's from. Good day. Hiroki. Hello, Hiroki. At Taylor's first question is that you've had such an outstanding career, um, working with so many artists. Was there any one gig or record you worked on that was the most memorable to you? Probably more than one, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Uh, oh wow. Y- Yeah, it's hard to single out just one. Uh,
Okay,
I
you
mean,
don't have to. Doesn't have to be the one,
okay,
and it could be more than one.
okay. Well, um, I, I'll mention one, and then maybe I'll try to sneak in
Okay.
one more. I don't want to go too long on this question, but I mean, getting to record with Alan Toussaint was pretty incredible. I've been listening to him for
Can
decades,
can you tell
and
me more about Alan? Because I know his name, but I'm really not familiar with his music.
he was a piano player, songwriter, composer, producer out of New Orleans.
Okay.
Um, wrote a lot of songs that you might not even know that he wrote. Um, and of course, I'm going to draw a blank now that
Well, I'll look it
I
up
just hung
while
myself out to dry. But I'll tell you this: about 10 or 12 years ago,
yeah.
I went to see him play at Joe's Pub. He was doing a solo show, and it was just one of those incredible things where he would play a song and then he'd say, "Oh, and then I wrote this song," and it'd be kind of like, wait, you were really like you just it kind of went on and on. And I mean, he did also play a few other songs by other people, but it was a pretty incredible show. His piano style is very recognizable. I mean, it's a very New Orleans sound.
Yeah.
He's also a producer. If you've heard the Meters records, he was involved in those records. Lee Dorsey, um, early New Orleans R&B from, well, I say early, like late '60s, early '70s. Alan Toussaint was part of that. Um, he also, I think, wrote the horn arrangements
Hmm.
for the last waltz for the band. I
Oh,
think somebody can fact check me on that, but I know
yeah.
he did write some horn arrangements for the band. He has anyway. He was. I'll send you some stuff to check out. But
Yeah.
the last two records that he made were both produced by my friend Joe Henry, uh, and one was called "The Bright Mississippi," and that was his penultimate record. And then his final record was called American Tunes,
Okay.
and he mostly recorded it with Bill Frisell is on most of the record, but they had kind of booked a few days with this core band, and then Joe Henry had kept one more day on hold at the studio in case they wanted to do anything else,
Yeah.
and it turned out they wanted to record this Paul Simon song called American Tune. And Bill Frisell and Greg Lease had already gone on and to do other things, so they weren't available. And so Joe called me up. He said, "Hey, do you want to come down to the studio tomorrow and play American Tune with Alan Toussaint?" And I couldn't believe it because I love that song. First of all, if you don't know
Yeah,
that
that
song, it's
song
an
is
incredible
incredible.
song.
Yeah.
And I loved Alan Toussaint, and I said, sure. So I came down, and it was, kind of the Joe Henry wrecking crew with Jay Bellerose on drums and David Pilch and Alan Toussaint. And what was so memorable, besides just, getting to play with somebody that I'd been a fan of for 30 years, was that we did a few takes where the whole band was in, and it wasn't quite working. So somebody said, hey, well, maybe Joe, maybe Alan, I don't remember, said, hey, why don't we try one where it starts with just voice and guitar, and then people will start to kind of sneak in after a while. So there I was, with my headphones on playing, and Alan Toussaint is singing in my headphones, and it's just me and him for the first, I don't know, minute and a half. And it was thrilling and terrifying at the same time because there was, nobody to lean on. It's just, he was leaning on me, and I guess I was just leaning on the song. And then they, after that, they recorded one more song that was a piano duo with Alan Toussaint playing with Van Dyke Parks.
Oh, wow.
Playing the song Southern Nights, which is I think one of the songs that he wrote.
Yes, he did write that. I saw that.
So people maybe don't even associate that song with him. I think Glenn Campbell had a big hit on it.
Uh-huh.
And so they played this really wild improvisatory piano duo. And then, at the end of that, we sat in the control room and we listened down to the whole record, which was, however many songs, 10 or 12 songs. And then Alan Toussaint packed up his valise and put on his jacket, and he said, all right, you guys, I'll see you at the Vanguard. Because at the previous record he had made with Joe, when it came out, they did a week at the Vanguard. And I remember him, his wife had made pralines, and we're all sitting around eating pralines. And he packs up his valise. He's wearing a dress suit and sandals, which was that was always his thing. And he had this beautiful valise full of all his music. And he said, all right, I'll see you at the Vanguard. And then he just kind of went off into the sunset. And 6 weeks later, he died in a hotel room in Europe on tour.
Oh.
And that was it. And so it made what was already a pretty unforgettable day. It just kind of really set it in my mind of like, everything is just in the moment. And, there's no guarantee of a week at the Vanguard or of anything really. And so it was really special. And I loved that song, and I love the way that he sang it on that record. And so that's one that sticks out in my mind.
Yeah.
I'll tell just this. I'll tell you one more story, and this is a much quicker one. Recording on Nora's second record, the record's called "Feels Like Home." She had Dolly Parton come in and sing a duet with her on this song called "Creepin' In," and we were all so excited that Dolly Parton was going to come to the studio. It wasn't like an overdub. It wasn't like you might expect, where we just sent her the tape and she went to her local studio and recorded it with her favorite engineer or whatever. Like, no, she came and sang with the band, and we were all we couldn't believe it. And she showed up and had super prepared. I mean, she knew the song backwards and forwards. It was an original song. So it wasn't one that, it wasn't like she was singing a standard. It was a song that had just been written for this record. And she came in and she did like a couple of takes, and she was like, well, what do you think? And what could we say? It was like, well, you nailed it. So, okay. She's like, all right, well, great. And she gave everybody a hug and just went off. And, I don't think she was in the building more than an hour, and we got two incredible takes. And the whole energy of the room was just all, electrified, and the room smelled really good. And it was just beautiful to watch somebody who, has been in a studio on a mic
Yeah,
thousands of times,
yeah, yeah,
and just to come in and nail it,
yeah,
really like, and not in a, like, you hear stories sometimes about Sinatra that he would do one take and then just leave, and that always struck me as kind of like, F you, like, that's my
yeah,
take.
yeah,
And you know
yeah,
with Dolly, it wasn't like that. There literally wasn't, she wasn't going to best what she did in a couple of takes, and she was like, all right, well, nice to meet you all. And that was it. It was so great. So that was pretty memorable. Just, I was really impressed by her.
yeah, yeah. That's cool. Um, yeah, I like hearing that because she's a very likable person and image.
Yeah.
Let's see. Now Taylor, of course, he likes educational questions. Um, and actually, you and I worked a little bit together at MI, or not MI, Llama.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, as a teacher, how would you best describe your philosophy, and how do you want students to reflect what you teach?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, um
Are you teaching now, by the way?
yeah, I am teaching. Boy, not as much at, well, okay.
Sorry, that was a double question.
That's all right. To be really honest, I'm I'm teaching less right now,
Yeah.
uh, partly because of the season. I always take December off, basically from Thanksgiving until
Mm.
early January. I like to take a break, but the pandemic really uh, kind of wore me out. Because I couldn't play, especially for the first 6 or 8 months. There was no performing. I did some streaming concerts, but my real bread and butter was in teaching, and also everybody wanted lessons. Everybody was like, "Well, I got plenty of time. I'm
Mhm.
sitting around the house. Why don't I take lessons?" And I was sitting around the house. I had plenty of time, so why don't I give some lessons? And it was a nice kind of symbiotic thing. But um, a year of that combined with Zooming, which I always had taught a few remote lessons out. There's always somebody in Europe or somewhere overseas where, like, yeah, sure, we can do Skype. uh,
Yes.
like, sure, but it was never like the main thing. It was mostly teaching for me has been being in a room with people.
Yeah.
And it just really, I got to Thanksgiving of last year, and I was just like, man, I don't ever want to do that again. It was hard. I hate to hear myself say that, because I actually do love teaching, but um, Zoom teaching and not being able to play with people. And I know, like, the technology's getting a lot better. Somebody just told me just today about this thing called Far Play
Oh yeah, I've
that
heard of that.
was developed by a pianist named Dan Tepfer.
Hmm.
And but it doesn't. It's the latency isn't the problem for me. I don't care if it's in sync or not. It's not the same feeling that I get when I'm in. Like, you and I were talking. This might have even been before we went on air, about how the vibration of a guitar, where that sits with your voice. Um, I don't feel that uh, when I'm not actually in the room with somebody. And so I, I love teaching, but I'm in kind of a funny place with it, because now my normal winter break is over. And so normally, like in January, I kind of open up my calendar, and I start teaching. And I'm being very cautious about it because um, for my own sake, but also for my students' sake, I would never want to teach. I would never want to be teaching somebody and hear that voice in the back of my mind, like, I don't want to be doing this, like that's not serving anybody. So it has to feel really good. And so kind of waiting until it's less fraught and we can be together again. And then I'd love to teach more. The main outlet that I have right now for teaching is I have a Patreon. It's called Guitar Tips Pro, and that's been nice. I'm able to create content, and I can keep kind of a rhythm going with my schedule. I know, oh, it's this day of the month. I'm going to post this. I'm going to do that, and I've been having a lot of fun curating that and like interviewing guests like you're doing now with me. And recently I had Peter Bernstein
Mm,
on, and
cool.
I had Bruce Foreman on, and this great guitar player in New York, Bill Ree, who's just incredible.
Mm.
So I have fun with that. And um, then the thing I was saying about not being in a room with somebody is a little less of an issue because I'm just, giving a lesson into a camera, and it is what it is. When I'm actually trying to teach somebody in person, like in real time, um, even after all this time during the pandemic, I just don't feel the groove of it. So, okay, that's enough. That's a kind of a negative answer, but, but, but the flip side of that is maybe is what my philosophy of teaching is,
Uh-huh.
which is that a lot of it has to do with playing together. Um, you know, the two teachers that I studied with, well, I'll say that the really four teachers that I studied with who influenced me the most as teachers, not just, hey, play this, but hey, I'm teaching you also how to teach. Maybe they didn't know they were doing that, but one is Adam Levine, who you mentioned. And also there was a great teacher. I went to Dick Grove School of Music, and so the guys there that really made an impression were Adam and Peter Butterfield, who was, I don't know if you ever knew
I
who
don't know,
that.
hasn't that name?
He taught alongside Ted Green a million years ago, like at Valley Arts, I think, or
Ah,
you know.
yeah.
But it was anyway. I'll mention these four names. So Peter Butterfield, he's now passed on. He just passed a few years ago. Adam and Ted Green and Jimmy Weibel, and all of those guys um, really gave me the opportunity to ask anything. Like it didn't have to be, uh, you know, eh, they would go anywhere my curiosity was, as long as it was a serious question. I don't think any of my teachers were interested in just kind of killing an hour of time. I mean, but if you had a real question, they'd go anywhere you wanted to go, whether it was a deep harmony question or something about Albert King playing the blues or something about anything. As long as it was a genuine curiosity, they were happy to explore it. Sometimes like Ted Green, some of our lessons we would just sit and listen to records, and he would, he'd ask me, what I was hearing, and we'd talk about, what was there. Jimmy Weibel, when I studied with him, I was 13, and what he was teaching was so over my head, but little by little, like I got to see like how much was possible on the guitar that I didn't even know was possible. But he never showed me that by making me feel small or stupid or anything. It was just like, look at this beautiful stuff that can be done on the guitar with music. Um, and it made me want to to rise up to be able to do it. He really taught music, and then the guitar had, you'd have to figure out how to um, get the guitar to meet the music. And Ted was that way too. Ted Green, like, none of the stuff that he gave me to work on was particularly guitaristic. And as far as I could tell, he didn't really like things that were too exercisey. He really wanted all of his students to play music. So he gave them things to play that were music and not just mechanical um, things. And so I all of that stuff combined um, is what I try to bring to my teaching, which is to um, find where people's curiosity is and take them as far as I can. I mean, obviously, some people might be curious about stuff that I don't know a lot about, but to whatever extent I can, I want to help get them as far along in whatever they're really excited about. And along the way, share stuff that I'm excited about. I have one student who's very often will just start a lesson with like, what are you working on? What are you really excited about? And so I'm glad to share that too. Um, the the best thing I could think about Ted Green, and all of these teachers, but Ted in particular, is that he was a good listener. So when I asked a question, it was never like, oh yeah, whatever, we're going to do this thing. It was always like he really could kind of tune into my frequency, and I try to do that, and then leave little breadcrumbs of stuff, like I said, of my own curiosity, of like, hey, check this out, or I think you might like this, but not just randomly, but like really, like I think you specifically at this moment or in
Yeah.
this season of where you're at might really get this, and yeah. Sorry, got a little carried away, but that's what it is.
Well, you're right. I mean, and yeah, you may have gotten carried away, but that's a good thing, because that just kind of leads us into your passion for teaching. And, you know, in my viewpoint, what you said makes a good teacher, um, because yeah, you don't want to pound the student with whatever you want to pound the student with. You want to be empathetic and and see what they need. And also for me, for instance, um, I guess I do this naturally, but I can see that it is a thing, but I think I do it naturally. I will get into the student's point of view just by osmosis or spiritual, I don't know what I'm doing, but and then I can explain to them through their point of view, and they get it bigger. And
Right.
like for instance, one of the heavier ones was this student who was really having trouble with her throat, basically producing the sound. And I found myself, and it's not like this hasn't been said many times before, but I found myself talking about the vocal cords and how it looks inside, like a vagina.
Hmm.
And but I'd never really talked about that before personally to a student. And I said it, and then I said, I don't know why I explained that to you like that. I've never done that. And it turned out that she had been abused
Wow.
and that she had always felt like her voice was blocked by it.
Wow.
So that's a good example, how I wouldn't have known that unless she had told me, and somehow I picked it up through her perspective, you know.
Wow. Wow. Oh, that's deep. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the best moments I've had as a student and as a teacher were things like that where you know, yeah, you tune into something that's unspoken.
Yeah.
Uh, hmm, wow.
You know, I would love to play something, um, and maybe you could direct me.
Okay.
Um, I'm going to, I can go to your channel or I can go to any of these. What would you think?
Oh, uh, if you go to, there's a there's a playlist there of performances
In your, no,
on
this
my,
is guitar tips.
yeah. Is there a place where it says the playlists?
Let's see if I can just,
If not, I have another way to get there. Okay, try this. Try Adam Levy, Rich Hinman, and then Maraba, Maraba. Oh,
Maralba.
so sorry, Rich Hinman, Hinman,
Oh, yeah.
and then new word Maraba, Maraba. And yeah, that top one. It's just a live clip. You don't have to play the whole thing. We could play a little bit.
Great. Okay, cool. Yes. The Adam Levy sound. Woo! Oh,
Yeah.
darn. It ended.
Yeah, it's just a homemade clip, so it
Yeah,
gives me
yeah.
the beginning and the ending.
Oh, that's really great. Yeah. That is really cool. I'm just because it's so short, I'm gonna play another one.
Sure. That's pretty funny.
Nice choice. Yeah. So who was that all? That great players, everybody.
Yeah. So the drummer is a guy named Dan Reeser, who I've known for 20 something years. He would play some gigs with Norah before things blew up.
Hmm.
So I must have met Dan 99, 2000, something like that, in New York. and we've been friends and played a lot of music since then. The bass player is a guy named Chris Morrissey, who's a newer friend, I guess. I mean, I've known him still 10 years. He plays great, plays upright, plays electric, um,
He was wonderful.
writes songs, plays in other people's bands. He plays a lot with Mark Juliana, the drummer.
Good spirit too, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the guitar player who also plays pedal steel. He played pedal steel in the first clip, and he played Telecaster in the second clip. That's my friend Rich Hinman.
Oh,
We've been friends for, I don't know, more than 20 years. We met. I was teaching at a guitar camp, and he was a student there, and we just been friends ever since. And you know, we've played a lot of music together, and uh, he's just one of my favorite people.
I've heard his
So,
name before. Where does he live?
well, you know, he was when I was in LA this last run of 8 or 9 years. Rich was in LA then, but he lives in Boston now.
Hmm.
Um, he's toured with Sarah Bareilles. He's toured with Katie Lang. Um, he's played on a bunch of records. He's just a great musician.
Yeah, that was really wonderful. Um, I have a question out of left field from Roland.
Okay, Roland.
Maybe he said, let's see. He says, me with my questions, not Taylor Hatch like at all. Adam, what do you think about the Ventures? Listening to this two guitar configuration reminded me of them.
Hmm. Wow. Um, uh, I really only know a couple of Ventures songs, you know, like I guess Walk Don't Run and Apache.
Yeah,
Um, I wouldn't say that they were a big, I mean, I don't know. I've had different versions of a two guitar band for a long time. I used to have a band called Lackawanna with a guitar player named Jason Krigler. And I've done some version of that for a long time, but I think I was probably, you know, more inspired by, well, the Beatles had two guitar players. So I think this, even though there was a completely different thing, you know, the Beatles were singing songs, they weren't an instrumental band. Um, I always liked the feeling of two guitar players doing different things. Um, and there's not as much of that in jazz really as there is in rock. I mean, there's tons of rock bands that have two guitar
yeah,
players.
yeah,
But in jazz, you know, there would be records like Mark Johnson had a group called Bass Desires with
yeah.
two guitars. And over the years, you know, like, uh,
I think Paul
Adam,
Motian might have had two guitar players, right? Bill
well,
Frisell and
yeah, well, let's see, I think later than that, Paul Motian had maybe two guitars like in his electric bebop band. When
yeah.
I first heard him with Bill, it was a trio with Joe Lovano. Um, but maybe I have to think about this. Uh, but anyway, the point is, it was kind of a rare thing, you know, like either you'd have a guitar trio,
Yeah.
you know, like there's plenty of those, or there might be a guitar duo sometimes, but like two guitars and a rhythm section, to my knowledge, in jazz is a fairly rare thing. I
Yeah.
mean, there's great records you can name, but you know, compared to like how many piano trio records there are, or what, you know, other kind of classic formats,
Yeah.
it's not a big thing. But I've always loved it. But I think it came more out of rock. So even though, to answer Roland's question, I can't say that the Ventures in particular were a big influence for me, but Maybe there was a seed back there somewhere because I do like that sound. The only reason I don't feel like I can really uh, own it as far as like a real connection is it's just that I didn't have a lot of their records, and so it's not in there not in the same way that like Booker T and the MGs is in there.
Yeah.
Like in my mind, if a bomb went off and blew up all of the Booker T records in existence, I could still hear probably 50 Booker T records in my head if even if there were no more physical records anymore.
Right.
But with the ventures, I kind of only can think of, like I said, the couple that you hear all, the iconic ones.
Yeah.
Um, one
See,
other,
Roland, see what you did? Yeah, and he said, in no way was I implying that your sound is venture-like. And also, I guess he says Joe Pass did too, guitar and rhythm section.
yeah, that's true, right? The with John Pisano, right? I think the Intercontinental record, I think,
And
is two guitars, and the For Django record, I'm pretty sure has John Pisano on it. So yeah, that's true. It's not
but it's
unprecedented.
not, it's not as common as in rock, of course.
Yeah.
And also, you always hear guitar players and piano players saying how delicate the relationship is between guitar and piano, but you don't really hear that between guitar players. I've actually, believe it or not, Adam, I have had groups with several guitar players.
Whoa, I
Like,
want to hear that. Did you
yeah,
record that way?
well, no, but as I was sitting here and thinking, because I'm always getting ideas of, I would love to record something with you, Larry Coons, and Anthony Wilson.
Oh man, that'd be incredible.
Wouldn't that be an incredible?
That would be incredible. That'd be really incredible.
So, three of my favorite guys. But I had like, gosh, this was a long time ago, but Steve Cardenas and Larry Coons and Eric, the bass player, Eric, who died.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
you know who I'm talking about.
I do, and I can't think of his name, but I do know who you're
Yeah,
talking about.
and I think Paul Krybek was in that band. And
Hmm.
so the one time I recorded with, let's see, oh gosh, it was a very bad recording, which, yeah, I won't go into why, but it had to do with the engineer. But anyway, it was Jamie Finley and Barry Zweig and might have been Larry.
Hmm.
Um, it wasn't the musicians, it was the engineer. It was really, I'll just say why it was bad. He was drinking beers
Oof.
all the way through it, and you could literally hear the beer cans being opened and crushed. And I don't know
Oh.
what that was about because he had a very long interest in recording people. It's just
Hmm.
it was very odd. It was a live gig, so anyway,
Hmm.
that was an odd one. But I absolutely think that's just such a beautiful sound. But obviously, I think would you agree that guitar players playing with each other are more intrigued rather than cautious, like with piano?
That's been my experience. Yeah, that's been my experience. Um,
Maybe just because of how the design of the instrument is and, you know, where it lives and
yeah, uh, yeah, and maybe like me, a lot of guitar players, even if they're, you know, known as jazz players, we all grew up listening to rock records first, and so that sound is in your head. Even once you get into jazz, um, there's just that sound of two guitar players playing is there, and then also you can really sit next to each other. The piano, much as I love it, is it's a big thing, and you're never gonna sit as close to the piano player as you would to the another guitar player. Two guitar players really can sit, you know, in very close proximity and make easy eye contact and feel the vibration. The piano is, have you seen a piano?
I think so.
You ever seen it? You can Google it if you want to. They're quite big, and there's no way, the way the piano is designed and the human body is designed, that you could sit as close to the piano player
Yeah.
as I would want to, you know.
And
And
get the
so,
vibration of the strings as
well, no,
well.
because it's
Yeah.
over, piano is almost a ventriloquist act, like the sound is really coming, and you could
Sorry.
say,
That's funny.
maybe you could say the same about electric guitar as well, because because the amplifier is over there. But I could walk in with an electric guitar and a little Princeton reverb, and somebody else could, and we could be, unsafely distanced. And I never, it's just, you can't really get that with the piano, unfortunately, because I really love piano. My grandfather was a pianist, and making music with him is how I got started, really. So I don't say this at all to say that I don't like the piano or I don't like pianists. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about, there's a physical limitation, to me, that, so, maybe I should play with somebody who's playing a spinet or a smaller piano. I just got to record with my friend Dave Leinard, who's an incredible young pianist in New York. And the studio had this thing called an una corda, which I'd never seen
Huh.
before. You ever heard of that?
No.
People can look it up. It's it's a piano keyboard. It's upright, but the whole thing is open. There's no box. It's just a framework, and each note only affects one string. So it's not like on a piano where you have dual strings on some of the notes. So I think that's why it's called una corda, one string. It's a very delicate sound,
Huh.
and we were sitting kind of right on top of each other at the studio, and I loved that. I could play acoustic guitar. That's the other thing about the piano, is that if you bring an acoustic guitar and try to play with piano, it's really hard. Piano is just louder, and the acoustic guitar has real limits. So, but all that said, I've had many groups with organ, and that's a different thing because it's electric. I love playing with keyboard players, but the thing about the guitar is, I'm talking myself in circles here. I want to be close, and guitar is possible, and with voice too. Like, guitar and vocal is such a great thing, because
Yeah.
you can really just be in the same
Space.
breathing, the
Yeah.
same space, the same air, the same vibrations, and
Yeah.
that's the whole. It comes back to why I'm not teaching so much, because I missed that. When I started teaching, I was teaching in San Francisco at this place called Blue Bear School of Music, and the rooms were so small. They were just these little tiny rooms with cork all around, and you almost had to leave your case outside. Like, take the
Oh
guitar out of the
God.
case, leave it
That's small.
outside, because you couldn't. And that's that kind of feeling I like, actually. I really like that.
Yeah.
It's
That's
like the
funny.
opposite of claustrophobia. It's claustrophilia or something. Is that a thing? Claustrophilia?
It is now.
Yeah.
You've coined a phrase. Um, Now I have a curveball question, as Taylor says, but I don't think you have to, tell us go into a total personal point, about you. But his question is, what helps you stay rooted in yourself, knowing that you have a gentleness to your character? Do you believe that humility is an important characteristic of how you shape your music? So without going into your, personal stuff, unless you want to, um, I think it's a good question that deserves, deserves some attention because being yourself is, you know, it's the lesson, of making music, and it's also uh, it's how we really deliver the goods to the listening audience. Because when we can be truthfully ourselves, then that's when the audience benefits the most. So, yeah, there's the
Yeah.
question.
So I absolutely would double down on that. Like, yeah, the more you can be yourself, the more the audience will get. Now, that doesn't ensure fame or fortune or anything like that. You
Mhm.
might only be playing to 10 or 15 people. Uh, uh, but what they're going to get is everything. Like there's just the more honest you are with yourself and what you present, um, the more that everybody is going to get from the time that you share together. And anything else, yeah, I don't know. Like, well, there's like maybe two things I'd want to kind of unfold a little bit from that. One reason that you might not be being yourself, I think of two reasons, at least that I get into in my own head, why you might not be yourself. One is because you're trying to copy somebody else. And the other might be that you have an idea of what a show is, and like, you want to put on a show. And I'm I'm absolutely in favor of putting on a show because sometimes people want a show. Like, not everybody comes out to hear music to uh, for art's sake. They might just want to be entertained. They've had a rough day, they've had a rough week, they've had a rough year, and they just want to be entertained, or they want to be wowed. And like, if you want to put on a show, there's definitely a place for that. And I would encourage you to study the great show people and study the craft of that. Like, if you wanted to do a show on Broadway, it's not just about sharing a personal point of view of music, but you have to think about pacing and architecture and how to frame it so that the impact is there. When you get to the third act, everything really lands and you bring people with you. So there's absolutely show is a thing, and when I experience it, it thrills me. I get really excited thinking about people who are really good at that and shows that have really moved me. But there's also so that's one way that you maybe might not be yourself, but that's a very intentional thing. Like, I want to make a character or even a caricature of what I like so that I can present this thing and have this boom impact. But if you're not being yourself because you're copying your heroes, stop doing that. Um, I remember when I was playing with Norah, I saw this. You could insert any names. This has been the record business for as long as there's been a record business. But when her first record blew up, all of a sudden, all these record companies were scrambling. Oh, we got to get us a Norah Jones. We got to get us a girl who sings and plays piano and like, or even like to say to somebody who has a successful record, hey, give us another one of those.
Yeah.
So the record business, either wants an artist to do the same thing again, or they want to find somebody else who can do that same thing. And I understand the for business reasons why you might want to do that, but scale that back down to just your own self and like don't chase something, like, oh, that person over there is doing something cool, or that person over there is doing something that's successful. So maybe I'll try to copy that or chase that. And that's really, um, it's a dead end. And when you're playing for people in a room, they can smell that and they don't want that. That's not why they've come out. Unless you're advertising yourself as like a tribute to so and
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
And the other thing that stops people from being themselves is just fear. Like they're afraid of showing what's true because of, well, they're just afraid of it for whatever reason. They're afraid of it. I don't even want to finish that sentence, but and you have to get over that if you want to be a performer, um, and an artist and share your music. Um, yeah, you have to work on that. However you do, uh, but you're limiting, you're kind of throttling the whole uh, pathway of what could happen. If you share something really genuine, if you share something really true. Again, that doesn't ensure any fame or fortune at all, but the people who are there won't ever forget that song you sang or that note you played or whatever. Um, so uh, I don't know. I'm not sure that really is the question that Roland asked about humility, but
I think it was Taylor, by the way,
oh,
but yeah,
Taylor, sorry. Okay,
I think that did answer,
okay.
I think, because yeah, I mean, humility is kind of, let's see, it's a good word to describe, isn't it? Humility. It's kind of an um, egoless acknowledgement of yourself. I'm not sure if I did describe that well. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, an egoless acknowledgement of yourself. Yeah, I think that's.
I remember when I heard that Buddy Rich said, I loved, this is kind of a different line of what we're talking about, but he said, I mean, and it was funny that Buddy Rich should say this, but which made it a little more impressive. He said you have to have enough ego to get out of the way.
Mm, yeah,
And that's kind of engaging the what my description of humility, you know. It's ego-less, although he's saying you have to have enough ego, but you have to actually, you can't, if you didn't have any ego at all or acknowledgement of yourself, then you couldn't utilize the best you and, in the situation.
yeah, yeah. And and you also might not ever leave the house or put on a show. I mean, you have to have a little bit of a sense of that what you do is special, uh, because otherwise you, yeah, you might just never leave your room and you might just play music for yourself, and that's fine if you want to do that. But if you want to be a performing artist, I think a little bit of, you have to believe in yourself. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
hubris, but you have to believe in yourself enough to convey, uh, to people that you do believe in yourself, and that you have something to say, uh, and to make stuff, to make records, to write songs, to whatever it is that you're doing. but I think the humility part is just um, not comparing yourself to anybody is important, and and it's it's just what we do is it's hard to it's a some people might say it's a really high calling. Other people might say, well, compared to what? Compared to a brain surgeon, or compared to uh, but
Yes,
it is
damn it.
okay. Yeah,
Yes, compared to a brain surgeon.
but I grew up really feeling the duality of music, which is that it felt utterly like magic to me when I was a kid. Before I could even play any music of my own, I always was listening to records. I had a record player in my room before I had an instrument in my room. And I just loved the feeling of putting on a record that a good record that really felt electric. And I wanted to almost like get inside it. Like if you ever saw um, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Willy
Yeah,
Wonka, there's a character, Mike TV,
yeah.
who just wants to get inside the TV. I was like that, but with the record player. I just wanted to get inside there and be in the music with the Beatles or with Stevie Wonder or with Bill Withers or with Simon and Garfunkel or with Cat Stevens. And and so it felt like magic to me, music, this is my point. But at the same time, my grandfather was an arranger working in Hollywood, really working in Burbank. I say Hollywood kind of metaphorically, but working at NBC Studios in Burbank. He was the MD on the Flip Wilson show, and he was the MD on the Andy Williams show. So, I got to see also that it was a business, and a lot of it just had to do with deadlines and getting it done. The show is, we're going to, Monday morning, there's a meeting, we're going to shoot on Friday. And, you know, however anybody feels about anything or uh, any, kind of magical, cosmic, whatever, like we have a meeting Monday morning, we make a plan, Friday we shoot the show. That's it. See you next Monday. We'll have another meeting. And also, so I saw that it was a business. I also was, in TV studios a lot and saw that TV sets are just, 2x4s, and there's a lot of just um, smoke and mirrors. That's how it is. So I grew up both feeling like music was the most magical thing imaginable, and also seeing um, the practicality of it and the professionalism of it, and it was all kind of together for me. And I think that kind of also helped me feel a little humble about what I do, just seeing what my grandfather did, because he, um, even though he generated a huge amount of music, when he passed away, you couldn't believe the scores and manuscripts in his garage. It was just like this bursting two-car garage, just bursting with manuscript
Wow.
paper, and um, but there was a certain amount of like, okay, we're getting it done, we're I don't know, am I making any sense?
Well,
So
I'm following with you, and you made me think of, sorry, I think I was on the road with you, so I was thinking of, my dad was a sax player, and he was
oh,
a big band leader in
I didn't
Boston.
know that.
And so I just remember, you made me remember going into the garage, and, he kept all the music in the garage,
Mm,
and
mm.
on Sunday mornings, I would help him put the book back together. And I like to say that, the smell of spit and smoke, I didn't realize what it was, but I just loved the smell. And then later I realized, yeah, it's spit and smoke. But, and also he gave lessons in the living room too, which was the room next to my bedroom. So in the mornings on Saturdays and Sundays, I'd hear him screaming at the kids to play the note or, so yeah, it was just, yeah, I mean, it's an appreciation for, but it's an appreciation for everything. But I really love that you said, I don't know, it was how you put it. It was the creativity and the business, the professionalism that I like even better than the business. It's the professionalism. That, and I think when somebody actually has both of those coming up, that forms their personality, that actually that's where humility comes out of too, usually. And yeah, I mean, the nice thing about this noontime hang is that I've talked to so many people, and a lot of people who had something like that coming up, in which they developed kind of a normalcy for what you were speaking of, the music and the professionalism, and then they just continued on, and
Yeah.
then, they became successful, and success being a continuity of those two things, not necessarily that you're famous, but you're well known for your quality and your professionalism, and so I can't remember where this conversation started, but that's what I was following along on the road with you, so that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to meet Tom Petty just a
Uh-huh.
couple of times, and I never had the occasion to do any work with him, but I got
Yeah.
to meet him a couple of times because um, his it's a long story. I'll just say to cut to what the chase is that my friend Charlie Drayton, the incredible drummer, his father for years and years and years ran a jingle house in New York. And I remember being at an occasion where Charlie's dad was there and he was talking with Tom. And I was only kind of across the room. I wasn't in the conversation with them, but the bit I overheard was both of them just talking about how music is a service. And, whether you're, um, Tom Petty playing at Madison Square Garden or running a jingle house and, creating ad music or whatever, like it's a service. And the way they use that word, um, I think was in both senses, a service like uh, you would have in a congregation, with any kind of religious service. And it's also a service, uh, uh, you pay somebody and something has to get done, uh, and I don't know. I'm not sure even how I got to that, but I think that had to do with all of that being wrapped up together, the professionalism and making stuff and creating stuff, and and then that other element of the being together with people has to do with the serviceness of it. Like it's a service that, hey, somebody might hire you for a couple hours to do something musical. That's a service. you might also be in a room with people, and it could be like a congregation, and that's a service. So that's maybe just another um, way of refracting that same light.
Yeah. Yeah. Service, that word comes up a lot in musicians talking about um, giving to the audience and what they feel responsible for and capable of, you know. Um, and then like a sister of that idea is serving the music too, you know,
Right.
and which people talk about a lot, of course. Good musicians talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's, I think about that for sure.
Yeah. So I haven't even gone into your history, you know. I mean your young history, and so you said you grew up in Los Angeles,
Yep.
and I mean I know that you were listening to records before you picked up the guitar. I know that.
Yep.
And gosh, guitar was my first instrument.
Oh, huh.
And then my mother said I had the perfect lips for flute, so I had to go to flute.
Oh, wow.
I actually wanted to go to the violin, but yeah, maybe she just thought, oh no, I can't have the violin in the house. I don't know what she thought. Or maybe she just thought I had perfect lips for a flute. But anyway, so um, your history and your any siblings and just a little bit about what was happening when you were growing up.
Yeah. My parents split up when I was real young, like two, 2.5. Um, and I was the only child from my parents. Within a few years, both of them remarried. I grew up with my mom, and she remarried when I was 8. My dad remarried around that same time. So then I had a bunch of stepsisters, but I didn't really live with any of them. They were um, in the other houses of the. I don't know if that's making sense, but um, my dad lived with his second wife and her daughters. And anyway, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Basically, I grew up an only child, even though um, uh, I did have a lot of stepsisters, and then I have a half sister from my dad's second marriage, who I never call my half sister unless I'm like talking in a situation like this, just for
Yeah.
clarity. But I
Yeah.
think of her as my sister.
Uh-huh.
Um, we didn't grow up in the same house at the same time. She's 8 years younger than me, but we've been close ever since we've been grown-ups. Um, but really, it was just as a kid, was what you're asking about. I didn't have siblings around, um, so I was kind of to myself a lot. I played guitar. I started playing when I was maybe 11 or something like that. Um, and I wasn't good at sports, and I didn't have a brother or sister in the house. So the guitar in the beginning was a very solitary thing for me. It was kind of something to kind of just escape to. I'd go in my room and just play. I never thought I was going to be um, on stages, or really being a live performer, which is a lot of what I have done. If I looked at my musical career as a pie chart, I've been on stages way more than I've been in the studio. I love the studio, and I know some people think of me maybe as a studio musician, but I've been easily 10 to 1 on stage to in the studio,
Oh
maybe
wow. Yeah.
25, maybe 100 to 1.
Oh wow.
Um, I don't know what that even means, but you know what I mean? Like really, but it's funny to me that that's how it worked out, because I started because I just, like I was talking about, like I just loved records and I just wanted to kind of lose myself in that feeling. So I played guitar in my room, not at all imagining I was gonna like jump up on a stage and do a
Yeah.
backflip or set
Right.
off pyrotechnics or anything like that. I loved music as a kind of as a meditation. and and then the other side of it was that professional thing, which is my grandfather's friends, and like for them a gig was showing up at a studio in Burbank at 9 in the morning in a shirt and tie and clean shaven, and probably showing up an hour early to tune up and read through the music and whatever. So that's really what I thought music was going to be, some combination of like magic and shirt and tie. And that smell of spit and smoke I got later, but for me it was more like smell of coffee. I associate coffee with music even more because my grandfather, all of that, when you're shooting a TV show, that's all daytime work. So
Yeah.
that was, there were some cigarettes. I mean, that was back when you could smoke indoors, so there was, ashtrays and coffee and stuff. But yeah, so I played music, and then in high school, I joined the high school jazz band. I could read just enough to hang, and so when I was a freshman in high school, this was in Thousand Oaks. I went to Thousand Oaks High School. I auditioned and got into the big band, um, and it was great because I could kind of read, but it made me be a much better reader. Guitar is a funny book in a big band. There's a little bit of note reading and mostly chords, but when the notes things came up, a lot of times they were like way up in the ledger, lots of ledger lines or funny keys. Like if you're learning to play guitar at home and reading, everything seems to be in G and D, and then you're in a big band and everything's in E flat and A flat, and
Right.
but I loved it. I loved trying to play lines and blend with the trumpets and the trombones and the saxes, and um, that was how I got into jazz. Really, was like I joined the band not because I loved jazz, but just because I wanted to play with people. And playing guitar, you can't march. There's no marching band guitar, so I joined the jazz band because you could sit down and plug in and play the guitar. And then that led to me really loving jazz because the older people in the group would always be like, "Oh, you never heard Monk? Oh, you never heard Duke Ellington?" And so they would lend me records, and I'd check things out. Um, and then after high school, I went to the Dick Grove School of Music and studied guitar and studied arranging. And somewhere in there is where I met Ted, because when I was in high school, my friend Steve was studying with Ted Green, and one day had to miss a lesson. And I guess Ted's policy was if you had to miss a lesson, you couldn't reschedule it, but you could send a sub,
Oh, right. I remember that.
which makes a lot of sense. It's like it means he didn't have to do all the moving people around. It's just if Steve can't show up Tuesday at 5 o'clock, somebody else can show up. It's fine, you know.
That is a very unusual way of thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I studied a little bit with Ted Green, and I studied a little bit with Jimmy Weibel because he was a friend of my grandfather and he wanted to help
Oh,
me.
oh,
Um, and then I went to Dick Grove for a couple of years and studied. And, by the time I was 20, I had gone through 2 programs at Dick Grove. And, but I was terrified of, um, I just didn't believe in myself. Maybe I didn't have the ego that Buddy Rich was talking about. So even after all this education and lots of positive reinforcement from teachers and everybody, um, it was really hard for me to just go out there and make it happen. So um, I worked at a bakery for a few years after I graduated from Dick
hmm.
Grove, and I did play some gigs on the side. That the big I continued to play in this working big band that played weddings and functions around LA. Probably once a month we had gigs, and I played in a horn band that was kind of like Jack Mack or Tower of Power, but not as funky as Tower of Power, more like kind of a show band, a review, two really great singers, a guy and a gal, and a lot of great arrangements, and we played around LA. But I wasn't making a living at it. I was really just working at the bakery and playing gigs when I could. And then in 1989, I left LA and moved to San Francisco to follow my girlfriend. She got accepted to school up north, and so I put everything in a car, in my little Honda Civic, and drove up to San Francisco. And that's really where my music career began, because when I got to San Francisco, I don't know, I think in LA, um, I don't know. I knew just enough people that I got a little bit lazy, and I was sort of waiting for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
And when I got to San Francisco, I didn't know anybody, not one person. And so the phone just wasn't going to ring. So to I had to hustle. So I started going out to jam sessions, and um, I did that as much as I could. I looked for every possible opportunity I
What
could.
year was this?
89.
What was Jim Nichols in your found friend? Found
Oh, I think I did know Jim Nichols. Wow.
great guitar player and bass player.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. I haven't thought of Jim Nichols in ages. But yeah. Um, yeah. And I met a singer named Shanna Carlson who plays
Oh
piano.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
we played a lot of duo gigs for a while.
Cool.
And and then things started to happen, because I just I was determined. I did get another day job. I was working was doing advertising at the local. There was a paper called the Bay Guardian, which was like the LA Weekly in San Francisco. I was doing advertising, but I would go out as often as I could to jam sessions, and then one thing kind of led to another, and um, I was already then in my mid 20s, and I thought, if I don't make it happen now, it's just not going to happen. And I didn't want to work at a newspaper for my whole life, so I got a lot better at going out. And then, yeah, one thing led to another. I played for a little while with Dan Hicks,
Oh,
who in San Francisco was, considered it. That was a great gig. And then
yeah.
I started playing with Tracy Chapman.
Oh, somebody asked how you liked that.
At the time, I didn't like it, but in retrospect, I think I was wrong. Um, I, it was hard. It was really hard. Uh, it was the most rehearsing I had ever done. We rehearsed. I was on retainer, and we just rehearsed for months.
Wow.
And coming from jazz, I couldn't. It was so. I really felt like a fish out of water. Like, I don't know why we're playing this song again. It sounds
Uh,
really good.
yeah.
Why are we rehearsing it again? Let's go play some shows. Let's make a
Yeah.
record. And eventually we did, and then it started to feel good again. But uh, I wasn't used to somebody paying that much attention to what I was playing. Again, in jazz, like, there's you might play a wrong note, and then you need to not do that again. But in pop music, there's just all this stuff that I had never really thought of about parts, and playing consistently, um, and presentation, and yeah, it was really boot camp, and I didn't love it. In retrospect, it was a great education, and um, uh, but at the time, I couldn't understand even what was going on. And then I left that gig after a little while, and I was still living in the Bay Area when I was playing with Tracy. And then I moved to New York, and then again, didn't know anybody and had to go out to jam sessions and cold call people. I'd get somebody's number from somebody and I'd say, hey, can I come over and would you want to get together and play? And surprisingly, a lot of people were like, sure, yeah, come over and play. um, I really, I was super generous. A lot of musicians who didn't know anything about me. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of musicians who just didn't know anything about me were like, sure, come over, let's play some tunes. And I really appreciate that. Um, I try to pay that forward now when people call me up and like, hey, I just moved to New York. Do you want to get together and play? Like, sure, uh, um, and then that's kind of how I got it going. There was a lot of people, but Jim Nichols, I didn't play with him, but he was part of a scene in San Francisco of players that I got to play with, um, and anyway, so then I moved to New York, and I started to play more with the kind of downtown scene. I was in Joey Barron's band for a while, um, who I had been listening to for years, playing with Bill Frisell, and
Yeah.
I was playing at the Knitting Factory, and I was playing at Tonic, and then in the midst of playing all this improvised music, I met Norah Jones, who was, like 19 and had just come to New York, was still really in music school, going to school at North Texas in Denton, and had come to New York just for a summer to do whatever you do when you're 19 and you come to New York for a summer. You just want to have fun and hang out. And I met her through a mutual musical friend that I had known in San Francisco. It's really funny that everything really centers back to just a few moments. Like when I moved to San Francisco in '89, and I told you I didn't know anybody. Um, Pretty much every morning I'd take a walk, and I'd walk up to this one coffee shop in my neighborhood. And every time I walked by this one apartment, I heard somebody shedding on drums, or sometimes it was somebody shedding on guitar or saxophone or or trumpet sometimes. And at first I thought maybe it's just one dude like who plays trumpet and guitar and drums. I thought, oh man, how am I ever going to make it in music when there's this guy who could, or a gal, I didn't know, but there's one person who's like incredible on saxophone and trumpet and drums and guitar. But it turns out one day I knocked on the door because I wanted to find out what was going on. And they were roommates. It wasn't one guy. But the drummer was Kenny Wollesen, who people might know him. He plays drums with Bill Frisell. He plays drums with Julian Lage. He's on a bunch of records.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Um, and Kenny was just this guy in my neighborhood who played drums at the time, but we went on to he's on my Buttermilk Channel record, which you mentioned.
Okay, yeah.
Um, he's been he introduced the reason I mentioned him is he introduced me to Norah Jones
Uh,
um, in 1999 or 2000 or something like that.
yeah,
So
so you were saying it's interesting because it's all, you know, it's connected. It's on a path,
it's
right?
on a path. The reason that Tracy Chapman asked me to audition was because my friend Charlie, she knew my friend Charlie Hunter, and who's a great, incredible guitar player.
Yeah, that's another beautiful.
Yeah, who I just happen to know. Like we're not. It's not like my manager knows his lawyer. Like he's
Yeah,
just my friend. But he recommended me to Tracy Chapman. Um, Kenny Wollesen introduced me to Norah before she was signed or had any label interest at all.
yeah,
You know, um, and then later when she was putting a band together, even though I had already met her, again, she had met Charlie, and Charlie recommended me. Like Adam Levy would be a good guy for you to have in your band. Like it's knowing people, and like, and again, this maybe comes back to this idea of getting out of your house, which I don't know if that's ego or exactly, but you have to believe in yourself enough to get out of the practice room and knock on a stranger's garage door and interrupt their practice session because you're curious what's going on, or go to an open mic night, or go to a jam session, or go hear other people play. Um, I've always lived in big cities, so some of the stuff I'm saying makes sense if you live in New York or LA or
Yeah.
San Francisco. If you live in in a small town, maybe there's less density. So maybe Kenny Wallison doesn't live up the block from you in Woodshed in his garage, or maybe
Yeah.
Charlie Hunter isn't hanging out and recommending you for gigs. But all of the good stuff that's happened for me has been the result of people that I knew, um, kind of, saying nice things about me, or recommend,
Yeah.
kind of being in my corner. And and so that's been a big part of my path, and as I say, I try to pay that forward, if, as best
Yeah.
as I can.
Nice. I have a good question from Veronica. She said her 16-year-old loves to play guitar but doesn't want to do it for a living due to the fear of losing the joy he gets from it if it's done as work. And you have kind of answered this, but maybe just a more of a direct statement. Did performance and or professionalism change your perspective and enjoyment?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it does. um, it's helpful if you can learn to get joy out of a job well done. I mean, I know people that play on Broadway where it's the same show 7 or 8 times a week, and it happens on time, it happens in tune, it happens in front of people. It has to be a repeatable, reliable thing. And um, you may not get creative joy out of playing in a Broadway show, but you have to get some satisfaction from knowing that there was a job to be done, and you did that job. Uh, that's got to be a good feeling. If you want it to feel like magic all the time, it's hard. It's really hard to sustain that. What a 16-year-old feels from music. If I could feel that, just a couple times a year, I would be, I'd be really stoked. But I sure try. I sure try, because that's what it all comes back to. For me, like, that's what it is. That feeling is incredible. One of the videos that you showed where I was playing in that club in Brooklyn with my friend Rich, that's the 16-year-old me. Even though it's, the 55-year-old me, it's the 16-year-old me. And I really try to tap into that as much as I can. The real, the reality is, you I can't do that enough. That's not scalable in a way that you can make a living from it. So um, it's challenging. It's really challenging. Um, the joy part and the making a living part have to be able to coexist, and if they aren't, it's okay to choose one or the other. You could decide, I just want to play on Broadway, and it's a good living, and nobody will see my face, and uh, I'm not, I don't get to connect necessarily with the audience, but there's something really special about doing it. Jimmy Weibel, my teacher, did it. He was playing in Evita when I was a kid. He was in the pit playing the first run of Evita in LA, and I think he really dug it. He's somebody that seemed to really be able to hold both of those things. He made this incredible music,
Yeah.
that's unlike any other guitar music that I can think of, and also worked his butt off in the studios. And I don't think he had any confusion about, what which was which. But um it's not easy. I'll say that, but it's something I strive for. If I could like show up early, like a professional, and also stick my tongue out and just go all out for stuff, and um when those things can both be happening, that's just like the best case scenario. But there's plenty of times when I play a gig like that and go home with $100, which sounds like a lot if you're 16, but if you're a grown-up person living in New York City, $100 is just isn't. I once saw this guy playing a little folk show at this festival, and he was selling CDs, and he would say, "Mel, I'm selling CDs for $10." He's like, "Believe me, you're gonna have this CD a lot longer than I'm gonna have the $10." And it's really true. So some days, but the joy is like doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And other days it's just about doing the work. And both of those are a kind of satisfaction, but you have to get clear and not expect that you're always going to get both in the same breath.
I think it's a lot like other careers, except it's the fun part of our job is so, you know, obvious, right? Whereas other jobs, maybe it's a little more masked within the job description and action. But I think, you know, we are all having the same viewpoints and recollections and reactions just at different times
Right.
because our circumstances are different. But that's that's what I would stress myself to somebody who asked that. We're getting to the end here, and I didn't talk about your compositions. And Taylor wanted to know if you've ever hit a roadblock or a rut and what you did to or do to get out of it. And Mike Campbell is here.
Mike Campbell. Oh,
And he worked with your grandfather
yes, he
several
did.
times.
Yes, he
And he
did.
said he was a beautiful man. And yeah, so
Takes one to know one, Mike.
I know, doesn't it? Um, and so also Taylor, of course, is asking, what do you want to do in 2022 that you didn't do in 2021? That might be the best um, area to end on, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah. Um, it really, I'll pick up. Uh, yeah. So the question about if I ever hit a rut and how did I get out of it leads directly into what I want to do this year. Um, when I've been in a rut, what I've done is um, made a, a scenario that made me accountable to other people, because sometimes if I just tell myself, yeah, I'm going to write a song today, I won't do it. But if I tell my friend I'm going to write a song today, I do it. So there was a period when I stopped writing songs and I started writing them again by starting a club. This was years
Oh,
ago. We didn't get together. We did it remotely, which is funny now because everything's remote now. But this
yeah.
was just because people I knew lived all over. But like what I did is every Monday, I guess, I'd send out a title to a bunch of friends. Hey, let's write a song called Promised Land. And then on Friday it was due, and we'd all drop our MP3s into this folder. And then it was like Christmas every week because, I made myself write a song, and then the payday was I got to hear 10 or 12 other songs written by people that I really, was that I loved. I was so excited to hear all the different songs called Promised Land. It didn't sound anything alike except for those two words. And we did that for weeks. And, I did a whole year of that. So I've done various versions of that over the years, but something like that I would encourage you to do. Start a club, like a book club, but a guitar club or a song club or whatever, or start a Zoom thing where, like, every Monday you're going to get together with so and so and write together, or whatever it is. Figure out how it would fit in your life, and modify it like that. But the main thing is the steadiness, the weekliness, the accountability of it. And what do I want to do in this year? I want to write. I'm writing one piece of solo guitar music every week. I did that last year, and then I stopped, and I just started again 3 weeks in. And I just want to write and write and write and write and write. The times in my life when I've felt most like myself, like this goes back to stuff we were talking about earlier, is when I was writing a lot. Practicing is good if you feel you're out of shape. If you feel like, oh, I there's a thing I need to get to and I can't play it. Practice that. That's great. But if you're trying to figure out what your voice is, I don't think that, and I mean your capital V voice,
Yeah.
Then I think that comes from making stuff, not practicing scales and arpeggios and whatever. You have to make stuff, and you have to do it all the time. That may not be sustainable. Maybe you do it for 3 months and you're like, oof, I need a break, whatever. But those periods in my life when I've done it and showed up and written, I just feel a lot more connected to the source of music inside of me. And for whatever reason, the last few years, I haven't done as nearly as much of it as I have done in earlier times. And so that's it. Like, I don't have a big, where do I see myself in 5 years? Like, I'd love to say my answer is, oh, I'm going to play for a week at the Village Vanguard. But I'd love to do that. I don't know if I can manifest that. I would love to do that. But I want to have music worthy of playing a week at the Vanguard. And I haven't written that music yet. And I haven't assembled a group even that would do that. So those are the things that I really want to do. There's already stuff in the hopper. I've recorded some things that those will be released. I want to do more with the group. The video you played with Rich Hinman, that group, maybe we could play at the Vanguard. But we don't play as much original music as I would like us to. We could. Somebody has to write it, and Rich write. We all write. I'm just trying to hold myself accountable. Like, the things that I want to do, all of them, a major ingredient is tunes, and I didn't write as much in the pandemic as I would have liked to have. So that's this year. I just want to be writing, and then wherever that leads to, as far as performances or recordings or whatever, I'll be excited about that. But I want to. I don't have a garage. I live in New York, but I want to be like my grandfather or like your father, and just to have this room that's bursting at the seams with music, with an impossible, you know, an impossible amount of music. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to do.
Cool. Well, Adam, thank you so much for giving me 2 hours of your precious time. And it's been so much fun getting to know you better. And you're a person that's very easy for me to talk to. And, what I find interesting is, I've always noticed this over the years, people you talk to, I'm not sure how to say this, manifest a way of speaking in me. So whomever I speak with, I don't have to be thinking about it. It's empathetic, and or shall I say empathic, or whatever the
Yeah.
correct word is. But you notice yourself speaking in a certain way, and it's totally has to do with the universe that you and this person have created. Of course, like music too, right? That
Mhm.
happens in music, of course. But anyway, I find myself actually speaking in ideas that actually make sense to myself, which is sometimes not the way it is. So
Yeah.
thank you for being that other individual who inspires that in me somehow. So
Mm.
I appreciate that a lot.
Oh, thanks, Cathy. I'm glad we got to talk. It's a shame when we were in the same city we didn't get to spend more time together, but I'm really glad to get to know you better
Yeah.
today.
And you never know, that idea that I mentioned might happen,
Oh, that would be incredible.
wouldn't it?
That would be really, I would love that so much. Um, really, if you want to do something like that, I would love to. I would really
Cool.
love to.
Cool. Well, thanks, Adam. And tomorrow I'm having Matt Otto on,
Oh, cool.
who's like also another favorite musician of mine.
Wow,
And
cool.
he's just great, great sax player, guys and girls. He used to live here in LA, and he moved to Kansas City. And
Mm,
he's so good. And
mm.
then the next day, Wednesday, I am having my band from my last CD on, Social Anthems Volume 1, which is Anthony Wilson
Mm.
and Josh Nelson and Edwin Livingston and Lorca Hart,
Wow.
with my two guest singers, Mon David and Paul Jost. So Wednesday should be really, that's going to be kind of a cacophony, or
Wow.
nobody's going to say anything because, they want to be kind or something.
Wow. Well, please say hi to all those fine people.
I will.
Um, wow. Yeah. Well, thanks for the conversation, Cathy. Thanks for having me. I really
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Adam. It was an honor, a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody. Have a really great day. See you tomorrow.